Hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Derek Main, and this is Read the World, where I review translated literature. Today we are going to review The Arid Sky by Emiliano Monge, translated by Thomas Bunstead, and this is from Restless books. This came to my attention quite simply. There was like a little buddy read going on around Twitter. I believe P.T. Smith started it. Just sort of showed a picture of his unread bookshelf and said, pick one out. And some folks, I don't know, 5, 6 or so, went through and we settled on The Arid Sky, which I actually knew nothing about. And so this is my review. I'm going to try to put it right up here if my editing skills have improved slightly. Although I'm a little bummed out that means my Dean Smith portrait is going to be covered up. Alas, this is not, try as I might, a North Carolina Tar Heel vlog. I actually don't know what you call anything. So The Arid Sky. Today's review is a little interesting because I have what I think are some interesting thoughts about the book and the work, but I don't know, and I'm kind of hoping as I talk through it, I don't know if I liked it. Like, I don't know if ultimately, like, I enjoyed reading it, and I think, like, when I first got it, I, like, tore through 20, 25 pages because the story propels itself along. I mean, it's a really well-trodden kind of Western, I would say, so, I mean, you get into it. But ultimately, where it lands, I'm not sure if it worked for me, you know, as a novel. So we'll talk about that. But there's two general things that I've separated this review into. One is the most obvious when you read this book, and that's the narrative structure. The other is going to be about toxic masculinity, so more about the thematic quality. The narrative structure is, I mean, the book tells you it is being written. The story tells you it's being written over and over, almost on every page. The main character, you know, has a full name, but oftentimes is referred to as our man. You know, and the reader and the writer are kind of in it together, like our man, you know. And the writer sort of is pensively involved in the story. He makes it very clear, like, I am writer, you are reader, this is story. Okay, so that's been done. Aspects of that certainly work. I do like the way it frames time, because The Arid Sky is really sort of a culmination, saying that life is a culmination of particular instances. So very important touchstone moments in our life add up to a whole thing. Now, not my personal philosophy, not the type of stuff I typically like to read because it is so set and scene based, but fun and easy to read, enjoyable, and you get some really cool scenes. So with that, it kind of can bounce around in time. And one of the narrative structures it does is the book or the story starts probably 18 to 20 times. I mean, you will hear the writer, or read the writer rather, say multiple times, and this is where our story begins. And truly, this is where our story begins. And in fact, if I was a better writer, and this is like real, I'm not at all bashing the writing. The writing's quite good, but if I was a better writer or a better storyteller, this is where the story would begin. I mean, things literally like that. So that is interesting narratively. And what it does, I'm peering down in my notes, which I'll do periodically. What it does is it adds to the myth. So The Arid Sky, this is a piece of myth making. And by making it the teller of the tale and then the reader, it makes the tale, and in particular the main character whom we're following, so much grander, so much more of a mythology. And so on plot, well, I mean, we are following one man's life, and he is, I would say, a bad man. And he is sort of an archetype, a trope, what have you, of a dangerous person. The back jacket calls him an infamous and brutal killer. And he certainly is sort of like leads a group of vigilantes, and it certainly seems in the search of sort of capital and riches, not necessarily any sort of like heroic tale. I mean, it is ruthless, and that part we're not going to find a lot of sentimentality with. Well, let me briefly, on the narrative structure, page 193. So this is the latest section I'm going to read, but I think it's really going to bring home the way the writer is doing this. And in fact, in the end, I'm going to circle back to this section, kind of explain where it leaves me. So page 193. Though I have no place in this story, though I have to accept that I only want to appropriate this life because my own is such a shit life, though I ought to admit that my existence as a writer is empty, and that I only tried to become a character because I have never dared to be a person. Super brutal and harsh towards himself, in this case, the writer. And by doing so, kind of lifts up our man. You know, our man has the story worth telling. The fact that the writer is telling it, you know, is just, he's lucky to be the one who tells it. You know what I mean? Like, it's got that kind of vibe to it. And I'll circle back to how I feel about that, but I want to give that as kind of a sense. Our man is on the pedestal. So let's get to the toxic masculinity. This is one of those books, and this is a trope throughout Westerns, where honor as a principle is a disguise or sort of a front for a very shitty man. An awful killer, unrepentant, but he has honor. And so that is supposed to draw, I'm going to say viewers, because actually typically I think this is more cinematic in quality, and these are things that we typically see in shows and movies more so, although that certainly could be me just not reading a lot of these types of Westerns. But that cinematic quality where we as viewers are drawn in to still kind of root for the evil man. So page 17, let's get a sense of our man. It will be many years before he understands that a man may escape his life, but never his shadow. And doesn't that sound just like it's said in one of those John Wayne or Clint Eastwood movies? Like, he can escape his life, you can change what you do, but you cannot escape your shadow. Like, you cannot escape the reverberations of the awful deeds you have done. And of course, our man, like, hopefully, like anyone, that karma might be real and that evil deeds will be punished within this life, particularly if, like me, you believe this is all we got. So next, page 157, same thing, like another kind of a familiar trope. I think you're gonna feel. The day they found that their boss, and their boss in this case is our man, the day that they found their boss had more to him than rage. The day that it became apparent there was a place in his soul for guilt and sadness too. And this, again, this is another trope of that toxic masculinity where it's like, but he wasn't all evil. Like, there's a conscience in there that is a seedling that is just dying to sprout. And as we, the reader, or we, the viewer, watch this, like, our journey is waiting for that seedling of goodness or conscience to sprout. Okay, so now you see why I'm taking it back a little bit to the writer and the writer's role in this. And by the writer, I mean the narrator. I mean, he's putting himself, the writer, Emiliano Monge, who I can't pronounce the name, but the writer has done a very clever job, and this is a clever, well-written work. So from now on and from before, when I say writer, I really mean the narrator. The narrator has really admitted to not only his passivity, but almost like a pitifulness. He feels like kind of a puddle. And there's something about that that not only, as I said, elevates our man, but it puts us as the reader in a particular position where now we really are rooting, I think, for that seed of consciousness, because the narrator has made himself impossible to root for, I believe. He started it and stopped it multiple times. He's kind of going here and there with the narrative. And then there's hints throughout that he's finally going to appear in the story himself. And then he does, and it's flaccid. All right, so a couple more. I want to give you just a hint at the bleakness overall, because I felt this was very bleak. Page 88. This is just describing a mesa, but excellent writing. This is going to give an example of the things I loved about this work, which is the writing itself, the description. A mesa whose principal settlement is Lago Seco, a village that is not yet a city and that houses 21,234 inhabitants, the majority of whom are believers in God, but have also come to the conclusion that he is worthless. I mean, that's really good, right? That's really good. All right, page 190. Again, using these last two as what I love about it. What the writer himself, the one who wrote this, not the narrator, what he has done, I think, that does accomplish something. What separates life from death, he thinks, even as he continues to throttle his deceased wife? Strange, in a way, that in the life of our man, responsible for ending the lives of so many men and women, death, or his fear that his loved ones might die while his love for them is still alive, should be the thing to fuel its most unpredictable turn of events. There's another aspect besides loving that paragraph that I really like, which is he's admitting, I mean, he's killed so many people, right? Our man. And the thing that sort of snaps him out of it is that, oh, well, what if someone were to die while my love for them was still alive? Not even while he's still alive, because it sort of understands that his love for a person has its own beginning and end in his life, right? And so we come to all of this to hopefully get at a conclusion, and something when I started filming I wasn't sure of, but now I think I am. I hate the character in the arid sky. It reminds me of the kind of brutalism, the kind of principles, that toxic masculinity in the John Wayne culture. I don't know if anyone's ever read the John Wayne Playboy interview from like I'm not going to guess at the year, but it's a perfect example of this. Well, it still plagues us with all of that, okay? And there's not a reprieve. So what is the ultimate thematic quality or lesson to the arid sky beyond brutalness and beyond that toxic masculinity? For me, there is none. So what I can say is I like the writing quite a bit. I like the story, fun, easy to read, interesting. I hate the main character. I hate the narrator within this and his complacent and complicit role in heralding our man. I dislike all of that, but I think I'm supposed to. Okay? So I'm comfortable with it, and I think overall that makes it a fairly good novel. But that's about the most I could say for it. I can encourage you to read it for sure. I've given away way more spoilers than I normally do, and that's partially because this is a story we know pretty well, and it's the writing itself that is the discovery here. There's so many incidents and set pieces that you are really going to like, and I didn't get into any of those. I mean, you're going to follow the murders, at least some of them, and they are interesting and very well written, very cinematic, again, in quality. So, but I've talked a little bit more about thematic spoilers, and that's because I think different readers are going to pull different things from this. And with every book, right, you're going to bring your own bullshit to it. And the bullshit that I'm bringing to this one, but I think it warrants it, is a really, really big dislike of this sort of man. I'm going to end one more thing on a personal note. Page 42, it doesn't have to do with the two qualities I was discussing, but it's just something that I read and I immediately responded to. Because it's the way that I feel often. And so odd that I would find it in the arid sky, but also not odd because, again, the writing. German Alcantara Canero, our man, who, a year after giving up his work, is still trying to ascertain what to want as much as what to do. And then it flows into something. But I wanted to talk about that for just briefly because it really hit me. I'm always trying to ascertain what to want as much as what to do. So I briefly sympathized there with our man. Like, it's not about not knowing what to do. It's about truly sometimes not knowing what to want. Anyway, I hope that I don't manifest by becoming a brutal, ruthless killer. So this is the arid sky, and I don't know. It's hard when you dislike a character that much and it doesn't feel like we really land anywhere that says anything about the character. You can appreciate the writing, have fun reading the scenes, but at the very end of the day, you're really not sure if you liked the book or not. So that's where I am. As far as the channel update, so I am very close to being done with the Perec Life of Users Manual, and when I am done, I will be posting my longest video because I have been filming it in sections. So after each section, I've been doing a new piece, and I'm really excited about that one. Lastly, I am reading Death in Spring because after watching Midsommar and after Michael Kiddo at Knowledge Lost continuously sings the praises, and I did not get along with Garden by the Sea by Rotorero, so now we're trying Death in Spring. So next up will either be Death in Spring or Life a User's Manual, depending on where I'm at. Hope you guys are good, and be good to folks.